I call to order the 217th meeting of the Equal Employment Practices Commission.
I want to move for approval of the minutes, meeting minutes of December 21st, 2017.
I approve.
Can you get Judith?
You want a second?
Second?
I approve.
Okay,
All in
second.
favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so, we completed, I thought it was 35, they have 34 here, agencies in 2017, 14 community boards, 11 Manhattan, Queens Community Boards, 11 Manhattan Community Boards, Office of Administrative Trials and Hearings, Law Department, Department for the Aging, Office of the Special Narcotics Prosecutor, Office of the New York City Public Advocate, the Department of Information Technology and Telecommunications, the Police Pension Fund, the Department of Investigation, and the Office of Administrative Tax Appeals. Judith, I thought we completed 35 in 2017, 34 here.
Yes, that's because there is a point where we went from resolution number 25 to resolution 24 to resolution 26 at the next meeting. So somehow a number was missed in the resolution numbers.
So it's an administrative error.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
So it's 34?
Yes, it is.
34, okay.
Well, okay.
But that still makes your number under the,
No, we're good in
Yeah.
terms of the quadrennial. I mean, we're getting back to agencies sooner than we
yeah,
should
so,
be.
I mean, so we,
Yeah.
quote, met our,
Quadrennial.
our required, our perceived requirement under the, rules. So I want to applaud you on continuing to meet that.
Thank you.
Great. I make a motion to approve.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Oh, okay. So Judith's gonna do a brief complaints report.
Okay, so, good morning. We have 3 agencies that have completed compliance, and their resolutions are up for vote. This is the Department of Citywide Administrative Services, which had 7 corrective actions and implemented all 7. The Manhattan Community Board number 6, which had 1 corrective action and implemented that. And the New York City Employees Retirement System, which had 14 corrective actions and implemented all 14 corrective actions.
Okay, I move that we approve resolution 2017 AP/217-868. Resolution number 2017 AP/217-346. And resolution 217 AP/217-009.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Approved.
Okay, so we also have,
You still have the Board of Ed retirement system?
yes, I have to
That's
tell
been
you.
forever long.
Yes, well, actually, this is the point where that agency is expected to complete compliance. The 6-month period ends on January 31st. So an agency where the compliance period ends January 31st, their last report would be the very beginning of February. However, I will point out that the Board of Education Retirement System is considered an agency at risk of non-compliance. And
Okay.
that's because it had 20 corrective actions, it has implemented 15. We have been in touch with the agency, they are making they are making movement. Even just this week, they've implemented 2 more corrective actions. It is slow because the agency, for some reason, basically, they do not seem to have the records of our last audit in which we assisted them to develop their EO program. And so Also, the Board of Education retirement system is not or has not been reported in the SEEDS system. So the agency has to develop, and we've assisted it, to get an understanding of the titles, of the job groups and titles, and that is an important part of this audit. That's 4 corrective actions are specifically about job titles, about job groups and job titles. And so, this is, thanks. This is one of the issues with the Board of Education retirement system, which has held it up. So, we know with another agency, the Department of Education, they also were not in the SEED system. However, recently, they have received a SEEDS report from DCAS, so that they can now report to us. More than reporting to us, they can examine their own job groups and job titles, and examine their own hiring and employment practices. So we've assisted them to get to that point for the non-pedagogical employees. So with regard to Board of Education retirement system, they are far from compliance, having 15 out of 20 corrective actions outstanding. However, if they request an extension, I would recommend that be an option for that agency. It's also another agency which is at risk of non-compliance is the Office of Queensborough President, which has 9 of 12 corrective actions outstanding. We have been in communication with them, and they are moving slowly, and much more slowly than we expect. However, what we found is sometimes agencies have been very slow to start, but once they get through the bulk in terms of job titles and job groups, then everything starts to move. Right, so that's another agency which.
But you're dealing with a different numerosity problem. The Board of Education retirement system, I assume, has hundreds of people that would be affected by job title, and the Queensborough President can't have that many.
You'd be surprised, the Board of Education retirement system has, I believe it's 88 employees. It's not a large agency. And in fact, only.
But what about the Queensborough President?
The Queensborough President, in terms of, Board of Education has 89, and Queensborough President, I'm sorry, I don't have the,
Can't be more than a dozen.
no, it is more than a dozen. Yeah.
But it's also like that, you're not, it doesn't sound like you are suggesting that either agencies are being stubborn or intransigent, that at least in terms of the retirement system, that they're stymied by other problems as well, so
Yes.
external to their agency. And
Yes.
so, yes, it does sound like, at least for them, if they wanted an extension, it would be
Right.
a big problem.
Right, and so in fact, in terms of Queensborough President, I would recommend that if they requested an extension, that they be granted an extension, because there is movement, it has been slow. Now, in terms of another agency that's listed here, Office of Labor Relations, in fact, we had a telephone conference with them yesterday, and there were only 2 outstanding corrective actions, and apparently it was just a matter of misunderstanding and lack of communication. So, based on our conversation yesterday, they will be implementing those corrective actions by close of business today, and the only outstanding matter for Office of Labor Relations is the agency-wide memo from the agency head.
That sounds like easy enough to do.
Right. They anticipate getting that to us by
Good
next
morning.
Wednesday. Okay. Other than that, of note, I do want to point out that the New York Police Department the compliance period ends at the end of February. The police department has implemented all 8 corrective actions as 0 outstanding. What is outstanding is the agency-wide memo from the police commissioner, which we expect to
Will happen,
receive
yeah.
within less than a week. So that agency will be presented at the next meeting.
Okay.
Pass this out.
Oh, I can give them a copy. The summary.
Commissioner Rice, you joining us?
No.
No.
Well, she should be, but. I guess,
So that's back to the, June is a much safer day for me.
oh, okay, so we're
So we
moving
just
on
move-
to.
And then they make it easier for
Oh, wait, we
you.
haven't, we're going to research updates next? Is that,
Oh, right.
You don't know yet.
Well, they don't know because it's
Oh,
not
that's
what
good,
they,
I don't have it.
they don't have it yet.
Okay.
It's gonna be depend on the speakers, but that gives you more time with your speakers. And by then, if they're teaching and giving exams, that should be over too, so it
Mhm.
should make it easier for you, I think,
Yeah,
than a
definitely.
May day, which would be right in the middle of exam schedule.
Mhm. Yeah, and,
I assume some of them are academics.
got at least 2 that are practicing academics, although more of them may be teaching.
Yeah.
Of the potential list of candidates.
Well, that's my theory in any event.
Mhm.
We need to sign.
We'll talk about it. Okay. Man, I wanted to show the enhanced sexual harassment audit. We voted, so if it's a good time for you to vote.
Jump on it.
Okay. Oh, okay. I don't know, I guess I just wanna say that we've enhanced during the last meeting, we discussed completing the agencies that did not have, employment practices audit and starting the sexual harassment audit on new agencies.
Right.
So what I did was, I wanted to sort of create a hybrid audit so that the ones that were doing the employment practices audit, we can still ask them about sexual harassment so that we can have sort of a baseline and not have to then go back to those
Yeah.
agencies. So I enhanced the current audit standards to, I guess, focus, to also ask about employment practices, but focus on the issue of sexual harassment. And then for the agencies that we've already done with the employment practices audit, then we just do the sexual harassment audit.
Right.
So we're gonna have 2 audits rolling out, one that's specifically geared towards, sexual harassment prevention, and then the other one, which is sort of a hybrid of employment practices, and then it also asks questions, on that topic. So, I can go into them, I can pull them up and show you the standards if you like, or I can email the standards to you.
Can I ask a couple of questions related to sexual harassment?
Sure.
The first question is, do you have an accepted working definition?
It's
And,
the legal, we're going by the legal definition.
okay, and then to the extent that, there are differing complaints, do we want to ask more refined questions of whether people have talked about unacceptable language, unacceptable touching, unacceptable exposure, and redefine and go in deeper as to what the complaints are. And then what the penalty, if any, has been administered by the agency toward the person being complained about.
So we have to be very careful.
I know you do, and that's why I'm asking the question in a way, I mean, whether we wanna consider even going there.
Yes, Commissioner Rice. What we have done, we have an audit based on the investigation of discrimination complaints. And we've enhanced the audit to also look at the investigation and training, the investigation, training, and, I guess distribution of materials regarding the prevention of sexual harassment. So we're not, even in the former discrimination complaint investigation audit, we don't look at individual complaints to see whether or not the penalty was correct or anything of that nature, but we do look at complaints in terms of what is the process? Is it interactive? Does it provide for, individuals to complain, to get feedback? And then whether or not the complaint was investigated in a reasonable amount of time. And whether or not there was a confidential report, whether or not there's confidentiality in the complaint process. And then at the end, it's more whether or not there was a mechanism to inform the complainant and the respondent of the result of the complaint, and then was there action, was there, penalty.
Okay.
That's pretty much the basis of what we would look at, but we won't look at, let's say, there was an individual complaint that dealt with sexual harassment, we won't look at that penalty and say, okay, is that severe enough?
No,
Rather
I
than,
wasn't even
was
asking,
there
but I
a
was
penalty
asking,
in a case where there was, probable cause?
I was asking a different question, which is, under the rubric of sexual harassment, there are different, if you will, complaints. There's a complaint of language, there's a complaint of touching, there's a complaint of actual, if you will, violation. And whether or not we are breaking any of that down, I guess the answer is no, because you have to examine the complaint, and that would breach some of the confidentiality.
But we wouldn't know that.
Right.
We wouldn't, because when we get the results of complaints,
You get a gross number.
right, we just get sexual harassment. That's the only thing we would know. And even,
But that, so my question was, no, you wouldn't get, so my question was whether you want to have the agency give you different kind of detail. And you could ask that question, ask them to do it, and you wouldn't be doing it.
Can I assume we probably have answered this, but who else looks at harassment in city agencies? So we would look at a complaint process, but Human Rights Commission, like the Human Resources, who else does that?
well, the agency's EEO office.
Right.
Or HR office. Yes, the City Commission on Human Rights, the State Division of Human Rights, the EEOC.
If it goes to them,
Yeah.
if it goes to them, which is the issue.
Right, those.
I have to take it to you.
Mhm.
They don't independently look at it.
Exactly.
Right,
Yeah. So,
but the
we're-
city's, the agency's EEO office would look at it, and if
Right.
they settle it internally, then hopefully the complainant doesn't go externally.
that's right, but the complainant
So-
has to go, to answer your question, there's nobody else that independently is overseeing it. We are overseeing both the process and therefore the complaint.
Can we open this?
The complainant would have to go elsewhere to complain about it.
Well, and in terms of the payout, the comptroller has information on payouts.
When it's litigated.
Right.
But many of these cases, and all I'm going by is from the press, many of these cases lead to the individual who feels humiliated or harassed to leave and go elsewhere and not to go forward and with quarreling about it at the period of time. I mean, what you're reading about, and I believe is probably true, is I accept that that's the way, I don't wanna jeopardize my job. I don't know what's gonna happen, and so I'll just deal with it, and one of the ways of dealing with it is to just to leave.
But it's just, I just on a parallel process level, do we look at racial discrimination or disability discriminate, like, do we look at those complaints?
No,
So that's, I feel like
we don't drill down into,
right, and so that I'm just a little bit like worried that we're sort of stepping outside of like,
Yeah.
what is our purview
Yeah.
here? And I agree that it's a huge problem, like, I don't disagree with that at all, but in terms of purview, we should be consistent about protected classes and like the discrimination process and whether this agency has the purview to sort of look at those things. And I feel like if we start looking at sexual harassment and the processes and even content of like what constitutes harassment, then we must do it for all other protected classes. And it starts to swing out, I think, a little bit beyond what we can do, but I will, I'm happy to discuss that, right? Because there's no reason for us to pick sexual harassment as the only sort of problem to.
well, the thing is, like I said, we have a broad discrimination complaint investigation audit, and we can look at it from that, I guess, standpoint.
Yeah, actually, what I will say is, when we did that audit, that type of audit previously, we did receive, and even during our comprehensive audits, we would request a sample of complaint files so that we could look at the time it takes, we could look at the opportunity to complain, we look at things like that. And so these are the issues that come up in the sexual harassment, that an individual may feel that they don't have an opportunity, they don't have an avenue. And so that's what we look at, and it does apply actually to every type of discrimination. Because there are many people who do not complain
That's
of
right.
other types of discrimination for saying, well,
The
I
same.
will be the same gender or ethnicity the rest of my life, or disability, I can't, let this stop my progress. So however it is, a person makes that choice, or there's no way for anyone to believe me, such and such. But what we look at, so we also look at, is there training? Is there communication from the agency head to the staff, to the managerial staff, all the way through, to ensure that it's clear that this is a commitment from the agency head to the all the way through the hierarchy of an agency, depending on the size, so that it's understood that this is not acceptable, and that if it occurs, it will be, there's a means to address it, and it will be addressed. And so I think that's what we've looked at in terms of.
So you do drill down, although you drill down by just getting representative cases.
I can say that's what we did in our last complaint investigation audit, but it was not to say, oh, this person you should have found probable cause in this case.
Right,
or
we're
that
only
case.
looking at the complaints to see how they were investigated, whether or not there was an interactive process, whether or not they were investigated in a reasonable amount of time.
Record keeping.
Right, record keeping, confidentiality, whether or not like I said, the complainant or respondent may have been informed of the outcome of the complaint or kept abreast, if there were delays in the complaint process. And then finally, whether or not there was a penalty at the end, if there was probable cause. And if they document whether or not there was some sort of, you know, action taken as a result of
Let me
them.
go back, and, so if you were really looking at complaints, you would know, or you wouldn't know, whether they were based on racial discrimination, disability, sexual harassment, you just know that there are complaints.
No, we know,
You do know.
there's a breakout of complaints in the city and in each agency, mostly mayoral, that DCAS does, which, well, first of all, we get the information from the agencies through the quarterly reports. But then they have an overall, I guess, database system,
Yeah, complaint
which
tracking
we've requested,
databases.
right, we've requested access to.
Mhm.
And at one point, they gave us access, but then we don't
They
currently have
stopped.
right
They kind of
access.
stopped
Where they
because-
actually break out, they take the information from each agencies and break it out across, citywide.
So they know how many
By
racial
agency.
discrimination claims there are.
Right, so it'll be by race, by gender, by, you know, whatever the basis of the complaint is.
Mhm. It gives the time frame, like when the complaint flushed, when it was received, when it was investigated, when it was closed.
Right,
All of that
quarterly
information.
report, so that I can show you. But each agency submits to the EPC on a quarterly basis a report, which also includes a breakdown of complaint, activity.
So you theoretically now know how many complaints there are of sexual harassment.
Yeah, we would know.
If we could potentially get that information.
When do you do this, every year, how many months, what is the time that you have to get those reports back to you?
We get the reports quarterly, not by every agency. Mostly the mayoral agencies. If the agencies are non-mayoral, then I think in this recent audit, we told non-mayorals that they have to submit something like I think it's an agency-specific plan, but they're not mandated under the charter to give us quarterly reports. So we asked them for an annual EEO plan. So it gets tricky if, depending on, mostly the agencies are mayoral, the information is available. So in this audit that we're planning to do, we can look at that specific information. Right. So, I was looking for computer. Patrick, you can go ahead and do the occupational segregation thing, and I'll get back to this.
Sure. What you have in front of you, I'm not sure if you've had a chance to see it before, but it is brief. It's a two-pager of the full report. And it covers findings, how we measured occupational segregation using the dissimilarity index, some of the more important graphics that we feel should be included. It really is a very brief breakdown of the findings that we had. Some of the trends, I think that the figure 1 on that document is interesting. It does show that there is slight improvement over the years since 2014 for most of the instances of segregation. And then we see below that a graphic that kind of is a loose representation of the magnitude of underutilization. Basically, we keep track of something that's binary. They're either underutilized or they're not underutilized. This graphic breaks it down to see the span as to how much they're underutilized. It's a loose definition of that, but I think it's explained better in the full report. But this is a good, just quick review of what that full document is. I said last time that we added in the additional research question, and that was research question 5, does occupational segregation affect all races and ethnicity equally?
So, yeah, if I can interject for a minute, so,
Sure.
because we've given this report to the commissioners and I just gave them a printed copy of the report with the updates.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
The decision that we're gonna make today is, well, one, we had a suggestion, in the past that we could share this with, I think, the public advocate. And we can make a decision of who we should share it with. And then, 2, we're going to narrow down a date for the conference.
Mm-hmm.
And you can speak a little bit about
Sure.
the
Once-
people that were invited.
Yeah, once we have a date, kind of a target date or target range at least, we do have a short list of individuals that could potentially be approached to see what their capacity is to actually come to the conference and speak. They range from a Princeton professor to a corporate senior diversity advisor. There are authors, and sociologists, and psychologists, and there are some noted experts in the field of occupational segregation that could potentially be options. It really depends on what we want to focus on for the keynote, more or less. Given that we're going in the direction of occupational segregation, maybe a senior diversity advisor may not be the most appropriate. We have heard this person speak at a conference that Aisha and I attended on state of the workforce diversity. And I've read papers by 3 of the others. I actually have samples. There's some links that I have that show them speaking or presenting. So we have an idea of how they sound and if they would be captivating
I think I
speakers.
mentioned at the
You
last.
did actually mention, there was one woman I looked into, she was,
The representative of, she had been the controller and she had been, had served in Congress. And we saw her here because she was representing the firefighters, the women.
mhm,
And why I'm having a senior moment with her name, I am, but Elizabeth Holtzman.
okay. All right, I remember you saying I didn't have,
And
I couldn't find her name.
she, quote, is a feminist, she's also been a leader in terms of being, holding, as a female, holding a position as Congress, holding a position as controller,
Mhm.
and still as an advocate out there, and speaks quite well. I mean, I just, and comes out of the city.
Mhm.
She still lives in the city and still is interested in representing people who are looking for positions within the city.
Mhm.
And as I say, we heard her here representing some of the fire women, the women who felt that the testing within the fire department was dealing with them adversely.
Mhm. Okay.
So
Sure,
if she can, she might be, for a whole host of different reasons, a
Sure.
person who could speak on
Sure.
diversity within the city.
I can add her to the list. There was another suggestion we had that I looked into. She was an advisor to Michelle Obama at one point.
Yes, a
But
woman
yes, her honorarium was, she's,
out of,
Yeah.
my guess is that you would not have to pay Liz Holtzman for doing that.
yes. And I think that a number of these, some of them do, but some of them don't. Some of them are academics that I think might be able to step in, more local people. There's a Cornell, there's Princeton, so,
Do you mind just reading their names?
yeah, sure. There's Anne Marie Slaughter, she's a Princeton professor and a lawyer.
New America Foundation, right?
Um,
Emily Slaughter?
Yeah, she's gonna be awfully expensive.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay. All right.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Francine Blau, Professor of Industrial and Labor Relations and a Professor of Economics. She's actually with Cornell, I believe.
School of Industrial Relations.
She's, there's Heidi Hartman, she's a CEO of the Institute for Women's Policy Research. And both of them have written papers on occupational segregation specifically. So if that's the direction we want to go, to have a keynote speaker that focuses specifically on that topic, I think that they're potential candidates. There's Ariana Heschwich, Program Director for Employment of Earnings in the Institute for Women's Policy Research, also another occupational segregation expert. There is There's, I think this is a very interesting potential selection. There's John DeVideo, he's a social psychologist, and he focuses on race and gender bias more broadly, not necessarily in the workplace, but I know
And
that
where is he?
I think he's at NYU.
That makes,
I think he's at NYU. I need to check that because sometimes they
Yeah.
move. But I know that he's an excellent speaker. And there is Patricia David, who spoke at the State of the Workforce Diversity Conference in Rutgers. She was a very charismatic speaker, and she has dealt with all sorts of issues, including pay equality. And actually, affirmative action compliance is another issue that she has worked on in the past.
And where's Pat?
She's in New York, JP Morgan.
She's okay. I don't know if it's the same Pat David.
Yeah.
It's a common name, but
Yes,
yeah, I know
yes.
her. Yeah, she's very good.
So there were a couple I had to scratch from the list because of the honorary.